Elias trudged across the barren plains of Aloria, his boots sinking slightly into the soft, storm-lashed soil. The sky above swirled with strange, violet clouds, and the wind carried sharp, metallic scents that stung his lungs. For a moment he stopped and scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing against the biting rain. The planet was hostile, unforgiving, and mostly uninhabited, but it was where he had been sent, tasked with scavenging supplies for the small human colony tucked far in the mountains. The colony had struggled for years, scraping by on the barest necessities, and every mission like this was crucial for survival. He adjusted the strap of his worn backpack and sighed. The storm was growing stronger, the wind lashing across the plains like invisible whips. Each step was a struggle, but Elias' determination pushed him forward. He was used to hardship. He had no illusions about life on Aloria. Humans were fragile compared to the great alien species scattered across the galaxy, yet somehow they endured, surviving in corners and outposts others deemed too small or insignificant. A sudden flash of movement caught his attention. He froze, holding his breath as lightning illuminated a jagged cliff in the distance. There, half hidden beneath a pile of shattered stone, was a figure. Elias' heart skipped a beat. The body was humanoid in shape, but not human, tall, lithe, with limbs that seemed longer than normal and skin that shimmered faintly under the storm's light. The figure twitched, a faint groan escaping as it shifted. Elias' instinct screamed caution, yet he couldn't ignore the need for aid. He approached carefully, his hands raised slightly. "Hello," he called, voice tentative against the roar of the wind. "Can you hear me?" The figure stirred, lifting its head slowly. Its eyes glowed faintly, a luminescent green, sharp and intelligent. Elias froze. He had seen alien species before in holographic archives, but never up close, never this majestic. Even in its weakened state, the being radiated authority, an unspoken power that made him instinctively step back. But the groan of pain was real, and he could not turn away. "Please," Elias said softly, "I'm here to help." He crouched near the figure, examining the injuries. Deep gashes ran across the alien's torso, and several limbs were bruised and bent unnaturally. "You're hurt badly. I can fix you, but you need to trust me." The alien's gaze held his, studying him for a long moment. Then, slowly, it inclined its head. Elias exhaled, relieved. He dug into his pack, pulling out a first aid kit, a small collection of bandages, antiseptic gels, and repair tools for minor injuries. The alien winced as he worked, but did not resist. Elias' hands moved quickly, cleaning the wounds, applying healing salves, and wrapping makeshift bandages around jagged cuts. "You're very quiet," he said cautiously, trying to break the tension. "Do you have a name?" The alien's lips moved slightly, forming words that Elias could not understand. He tilted his head, frowning. "I don't know what that means," he admitted. "I'm human, my name is Elias, that's all I can offer." The alien watched him silently, then with an almost imperceptible nod seemed to acknowledge the introduction. Elias smiled faintly, relieved at the small gesture. Despite the alien's otherworldly appearance, there was a humanity to its eyes, an intelligence and awareness that made him hesitate before speaking too loudly. Hours passed as Elias worked. The storm raged, lightning cutting across the sky, and the wind howled through the broken cliffs. Yet within their small shelter of jagged rocks, a fragile bond began to form. Elias talked, more to keep himself grounded than for any expectation of response. He told the alien stories of the colony, of their struggles to grow food in barren soil, of children laughing in the rain, and of simple human routines that seemed meaningless but were sacred to him. The alien listened, its head tilted slightly, eyes never leaving him. Elias noticed subtle movements, fingers flexing in ways that seemed like they were sensing more than just the touch of his hands, a slight hum vibrating through the air as though the being was absorbing more than he realized. He felt a shiver, not of fear, but of awe. There was something extraordinary about this creature, something he could not yet comprehend. When night fell, the storm did not ease. Elias set up a small shelter using torn sheets from his pack and fragments of rock to shield the alien from the worst of the rain. He worked quietly, aware that any sudden movement might frighten the being. As he finished, he paused to look at the alien. Its breathing was steady now, wounds stabilized, but Elias knew that without continued care, survival was uncertain. "Rest now," he said softly. "I'll watch over you." The alien's eyes met his again, lingering in a gaze that seemed to communicate gratitude. Elias felt warmth spread through his chest, a strange, comforting feeling. He had been trained to heal humans, to patch up soldiers and settlers alike, but there was a difference in tending an alien. This was someone or something who could change the galaxy, and somehow it had allowed him into its trust. Sleep came in fitful waves, interrupted by the distant rumble of thunder and the occasional groan from the alien. Elias dreamed of stars, vast, spiraling galaxies filled with civilizations, each teeming with life and complexity. In his dream, he was small, a tiny human amidst the cosmic scale, yet the presence of the alien beside him felt protective, almost empowering. When he awoke, the storm had eased, leaving only a fine drizzle. Mist rose from the plains, curling around jagged rocks like ghostly fingers. Elias checked the alien's wounds again. There was improvement, but he knew they couldn't remain in this exposed location. Movement was dangerous, yet staying put risked discovery. The alien's presence alone could draw attention, and he suspected that enemies, though unknown to him, were already searching for it. "I think we need to move," he said quietly. "There's a safer place not far from here. I can get you there." The alien watched him, then extended a hand. Elias hesitated before taking it, marveling at its strength. The fingers were long, elegant, and surprisingly warm, even under the chill of the mist. As they made their way across the slick terrain, Elias noticed other signs. Small creatures that usually fled human presence were cautiously observing them, bowing their tiny heads. Birds and flying creatures veered away, leaving a clear path. Elias felt a mix of wonder and unease. There was power here, subtle but undeniable, and he could not yet gauge its full extent. Hours of careful travel brought them to a hidden valley, surrounded by steep cliffs and thick, bioluminescent vegetation. The place was quiet, almost sacred, a natural sanctuary in the middle of chaos. Elias set up a temporary camp, ensuring the alien was sheltered and comfortable. He worked quickly, gathering herbs and simple remedies, applying them to minor scrapes and bruises. The alien's movements were slow but deliberate, observing him with curiosity and intelligence. You are strong," Elias said finally, breaking a silence that had stretched for hours. "Even wounded, you have strength. I don't know what you've been through, but it must have been unimaginable." The alien's eyes flickered, as if acknowledging his words. Elias could not read the expression fully. There was no human analogy for it, but he sensed approval, and maybe amusement. Night fell again, this time quieter. Stars emerged above, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Elias sat near the alien, tending minor wounds, speaking softly about human life and hope. He told stories of small victories, of children finding joy in a harsh world, of neighbors helping each other survive. The alien's eyes followed him, attentive, thoughtful. At one point, Elias looked directly into those glowing green eyes. "I don't know who you really are," he admitted, "but I think, whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." For the first time, the alien moved closer, resting its head near him in a gesture of trust. Elias felt a shiver of awe. Here was a being whose name alone could change the course of galactic history, and yet it had placed itself in his care. He realized that the act of tending wounds was not just about healing flesh. It was about forging connection, trust, and understanding. And in that quiet, rain-washed valley, amidst the alien glow of flora and the soft hum of unseen life, Elias understood the enormity of what he had stumbled upon. Outside, distant sounds stirred the mist, something approaching, perhaps. Elias' heart rate quickened, yet he remained calm, hands hovering protectively over the alien. Whatever came next, he thought, we would face it together. And in that moment, he did not know that the figure he nurtured was not merely powerful, but a queen, a warrior whose reputation spanned galaxies, feared by armies, revered by civilizations. Yet for Elias, she was simply the injured stranger who had allowed him to care for her. In the human heart, there was courage and empathy that even the mightiest beings could recognize. And in this quiet valley, such courage would soon be tested. The morning sun broke slowly through the violet mist, casting a soft light on the valley. Elias stirred awake, muscles aching from a restless sleep. He glanced at the alien resting beside him. Her movements were subtle, deliberate, as if she were assessing the world around her while maintaining the fragile calm of the sanctuary. He had taken to calling her she, though he did not yet know her name. There was a presence about her, quiet but commanding, that demanded respect even in her weakened state. Elias carefully checked her bandages and applied fresh salves to the deeper wounds. Her skin was cool, almost metallic under his touch, and he could feel the faint pulse of something beyond normal biology. She watched him silently, her glowing green eyes following every movement, yet she said nothing. He felt the weight of her gaze, a mix of curiosity and subtle amusement, as if she were learning about him while allowing him to think he was learning about her. "We need to keep moving soon," he said softly, more to himself than to her. "The valley is safe for now, but someone, or something, will find us if we stay here too long." Her head lifted slightly at his words. Elias noticed the faintest twitch in her fingers, almost imperceptible, yet the surrounding mist seemed to shimmer in response. He blinked, unsure if it was a trick of the light or something more. He gathered their meager supplies, water flasks, a few rations, and his medical kit. As he prepared to leave, he noticed small tracks in the soft soil nearby, creatures he did not recognize, moving cautiously around the valley. They were not afraid of the alien, yet they kept a respectful distance. Elias shivered. The presence of the being he tended seemed to alter the natural balance around them. "All right," he said, helping her to stand. "We move carefully, stick close to me." She allowed him to support her, and together they began the slow trek through the valley. Every step required careful balance. The ground was uneven, dotted with jagged rocks and hidden pools of mist-filled water. Elias led the way, using his human ingenuity to find the safest path. Despite her strength, she moved cautiously, deferring to his guidance. It was a strange dance of mutual trust. As they walked, Elias tried to learn more about her. He asked questions in simple, deliberate tones. "Do you understand me?" he said. "Can you talk?" The alien tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then with a soft, musical hum, she made sounds that Elias could not comprehend. He frowned. "I see you're trying, that's okay. I can't understand you yet, but maybe you'll teach me." The hum seemed to linger in the air, vibrating gently, almost harmonizing with the valley itself. Elias felt a faint tingling across his skin, as if the energy around her was alive. He shook his head and forced himself to focus. He had to keep moving. Hours passed. They crossed narrow ridges and twisted canyons, moving carefully to avoid slips and falls. Elias was keenly aware of the alien's subtle power. Occasionally, he would misstep, only to feel a gentle shift in the ground beneath him, a slight push that kept him balanced. Sometimes rocks would slide dangerously, and she would extend a hand, but instead of touching them, the rocks stopped mid-roll, as if controlled by her will. Elias noticed these things but did not yet fully grasp what he was witnessing. He attributed it to some unknown alien reflex, not realizing the Queen's full capability. Despite the physical strain, Elias felt a growing admiration for her. She moved with grace even in weakness, her calm under pressure a stark contrast to his own constant alertness. He found himself talking more, sharing stories of human life. The way they built shelters, how they harvested food, how they celebrated small victories. He told her about the children in the colony, their laughter echoing across the mountains, and she listened, tilting her head, eyes softening in ways he could not interpret. At one point, a sudden tremor shook the valley. Elias froze. Rocks tumbled from the cliffs, and the wind carried a strange, high-pitched screech. Instinctively, he grabbed the alien's arm, trying to shield her, but before he could react, a gentle wave of energy pulsed from her body. The falling rocks slowed, hovering midair before settling harmlessly around them. Elias' mouth fell open. What did you do?" he whispered. She only looked at him, eyes calm and unreadable. There was no aggression, no explanation, only presence. Elias swallowed hard, realizing that her strength was far beyond anything he had imagined. Yet despite the demonstration, she did not flaunt it. She moved as if she did not even notice the small miracle she had performed. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I thought I was protecting you, but maybe you're protecting me." Her lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly, and Elias felt a warmth spread through his chest. It was the first acknowledgement he had ever received from her beyond the silent trust that had formed in the valley. He realized that in some unspoken way, they were partners, navigating a world that neither fully understood. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the terrain, Elias found a small stream. He helped her sit beside it and began treating minor scrapes from the day's journey. She watched silently, occasionally shifting her position, her eyes scanning the surrounding landscape as if anticipating unseen threats. "You must have fought something powerful," Elias said cautiously. "Your wounds, they're not from just animals or storms." Her gaze met his. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of something in her expression, pain, perhaps, or memory. Elias respected her silence. He did not press further. Whatever battles she had faced, they were hers to reveal. He focused on what he could do, care, protect, and guide them to safety. The night fell quickly, colder than he expected. Elias built a small fire from driftwood and branches, the flames casting dancing shadows across her form. He watched her quietly. Even in rest, she exuded an aura that was hard to ignore. There was power, authority, and a strange vulnerability combined, a combination that fascinated him. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we move toward the canyon. It's safer there, and I've heard of an abandoned shelter nearby. You'll be out of sight, and I can keep you fed and healed. We'll make it work." She hummed in response, a soft, melodic sound that carried across the stream. Elias smiled faintly. It was not a human sound, but it was comforting, almost like agreement. Sleep came slowly, both for Elias and the alien. He kept watch in shifts, observing the valley and its subtle movements. Occasionally, he would notice small animals approaching, drawn not to him but to her. They seemed aware of her presence in ways he could not explain. And yet there was no fear in the creatures, only respect, deference, or perhaps recognition of something greater. Elias felt a deep sense of awe. In the quiet hours before dawn, Elias reflected on what he had witnessed. This was no ordinary alien. Her strength, her subtle control over the environment, her calm in the face of danger. It was unlike anything he had read or imagined. Yet despite it all, she had allowed him to tend her wounds, to care for her. That choice, he realized, was extraordinary. Even in the vastness of the galaxy, power often corrupted. Yet here was a being who, despite her capability, accepted his humanity, his small courage, and his simple kindness. When the first light of dawn broke across the valley, Elias gently shook her awake. "Time to move," he said. "The shelter is not far, and the sooner we get there, the safer we'll be." She rose, her movements fluid and careful. Elias offered his arm again, and she took it without hesitation. Together they set off, moving through the misty morning light. The journey was slow, careful, each step measured. Elias found himself more aware than ever, alert to every sound, every movement, every shift in the ground. But he was not afraid, not entirely. There was a strange reassurance in her presence, a quiet strength that seemed to whisper, "We will face this together." By midday, they reached the canyon. Elias scouted ahead, finding a narrow passage that would lead them to the abandoned shelter he had heard about. The walls were steep, but the path was stable. He guided her carefully, helping her over tricky rocks and through uneven terrain. Each time she stumbled, a subtle shift of her body, or a quiet, unseen force kept her safe. Elias marveled silently, still unaware of the true scale of her power. Finally, they reached the shelter, a small, abandoned structure carved into the canyon wall. It was simple, with stone walls and a natural roof formed by the rock above. Elias led her inside and set about creating a safe space. He laid out blankets, prepared water, and checked her injuries once more. She sat quietly, observing him, her eyes bright with silent understanding. Elias looked at her, a mixture of admiration and curiosity in his gaze. "I don't know your name," he said softly. "I don't know who you really are, but I think we make a good team, and I'll do everything I can to keep you safe." She hummed again, low and melodic, and Elias felt a connection deepen between them. He could not explain it. Perhaps it was trust, respect, or something more profound. But he knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Outside, the canyon winds whispered through the rocks, carrying distant sounds from the outside world. Somewhere out there, enemies searched, unaware that the most powerful warrior in the galaxy rested here, tended by the hands of a human who had no idea of her true identity. And Elias, for all his curiosity and bravery, remained blissfully unaware of the scale of the being he had chosen to protect. Yet in that quiet moment, he understood something more important than power. Compassion, courage, and trust could bridge the gap between worlds, even in a universe filled with danger and uncertainty. For the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. They had survived one more day together, and somehow that felt like a victory. The morning light fell gently into the small shelter, filtering through cracks in the stone walls. Elias stirred first, his body stiff from the previous day's travel. The valley had been merciless, and his muscles ached from guiding the alien through rough terrain. He glanced at her. She was awake, sitting silently on the stone floor, her glowing green eyes fixed on the faint light of dawn. Even in rest, she radiated presence, a quiet power that made him feel both awed and oddly safe. He rose quietly and checked her bandages. Her wounds had healed further overnight, but he could still see the faint scars and bruises marking the battles she had endured. He applied fresh salve, his hands gentle, careful not to disturb her. She leaned slightly into him, a gesture of trust, and Elias felt a surge of warmth in his chest. "We need to keep moving," he said softly, his voice low so as not to startle her. "The shelter is safe, but only for now. I know of a path that leads deeper into the canyon, more hidden, more secure. If we can reach it before anyone finds us, we'll have some peace." She did not respond with words. She simply stood, stretching carefully, and Elias offered his arm. She accepted, their connection solidifying in silence. Together they stepped outside into the soft morning light. The canyon stretched before them, narrow and winding, shadows hiding every curve and crevice. Elias led the way, alert to every sound. The first few hours passed uneventfully. The alien moved carefully, yet with a grace that made Elias' own movements feel clumsy. He couldn't help but notice the way her fingers flexed, how she seemed to sense the terrain before stepping, how the air around her occasionally shimmered subtly, as if alive. He did not understand it, but he did not question it either. He only marveled, a silent acknowledgement of something beyond human understanding. By mid-morning, the faintest movement in the shadows caught his attention. Small creatures scuttled away from the path, leaving it unnaturally clear. He frowned. The valley had been quiet yesterday, but now the world seemed aware of them, watching, waiting. Elias' heart rate quickened. Something was coming. He glanced at her, noting how her head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing. There was an alertness there, far beyond human reaction time, subtle but undeniable. Elias swallowed hard. Whatever was approaching, she was aware of it long before he could perceive it. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. Elias froze. The being was humanoid but larger than any human, dressed in sleek armor that reflected the dim sunlight. He raised his voice cautiously. "We don't want trouble. Please leave us be." The armored figure hesitated, then stepped forward deliberately, revealing the insignia of a galactic bounty faction. Elias' stomach tightened. He had read about these groups, mercenaries hired to capture high-value targets. And if they were searching here, it could only mean one thing. She was not an ordinary alien. "She is not just injured," Elias whispered under his breath. "They are after her." The alien queen remained silent, standing beside him. Elias noticed a faint shimmer around her, like a subtle aura, though he couldn't yet understand its meaning. He positioned himself slightly in front of her, instinctively protective, though he knew he could not match the strength of the approaching enemy. The mercenary spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Step aside. The target is required alive. Do not resist, or you will both regret it." Elias' mind raced. There was no way they could overpower him, let alone the alien beside him, but he refused to abandon her. "We're not leaving," he said steadily. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." The mercenary raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Try me." Elias realized then that he had no weapons beyond his basic survival tools and his wits. He took a deep breath, thinking quickly. He spotted loose stones above, precarious ledges, and narrow crevices that could be used to create obstacles. If he could buy time, she might be able to protect herself. He whispered to her, "I'm going to create a distraction. Be ready." She tilted her head, understanding. Without protest, she allowed him to move forward. Elias picked up several stones and hurled them toward the ledge above the mercenary. A small cascade of rock tumbled down, forcing the man to shield himself. Elias seized the moment to dart behind a natural wall, then threw another handful of stones, creating a small landslide that blocked the direct path. The mercenary cursed, advancing cautiously. Elias felt his pulse hammering in his ears. He glanced at her. She was calm, eyes fixed on the enemy, hands at her sides, body poised with precision. And then she acted. A subtle shift in the air, almost imperceptible, caused the mercenary to stumble. Elias blinked. He had not touched him. The man's balance faltered, and he nearly fell over the edge of the canyon path. Elias realized with shock that the alien had intervened, but gently. The man was not harmed, only incapacitated enough to give them space. Elias' mouth fell open. You saved him," he whispered. She only looked at him, eyes calm, unreadable. Elias felt a mixture of awe and fear. The being he had tended, the one he had thought of as fragile and wounded, was capable of feats he could barely comprehend. And yet she had chosen not to harm anyone. The mercenary recovered, clearly confused by the sudden events. He paused, reassessing. Elias saw an opportunity. Using his knowledge of terrain and careful timing, he led the man on a chase, darting through crevices, up narrow paths, and around jagged rocks. Each step was calculated, designed to disorient and slow the mercenary without endangering him. Meanwhile, the alien queen moved with him, silent and graceful, her aura providing subtle control over the environment. Elias noticed that small rocks seemed to shift in her path, giving them advantage. Streams of light refracted oddly around her, almost as if the very atmosphere acknowledged her presence. He could not explain it, but he did not question it. After several tense minutes, they reached a safer section of the canyon. The mercenary was exhausted, his attempts to advance frustrated by the terrain and Elias' quick thinking. Elias stopped, breathing hard, and looked at the alien beside him. "We made it," he said. "For now." She inclined her head, eyes softening slightly. Elias felt an unexpected connection, a recognition that his courage and quick thinking had mattered. For all her power, she had allowed him to lead, to strategize, to protect. And in that act, Elias realized something profound. Humanity's strength was not always in physical might, but in creativity, determination, and courage. They moved again, carefully, until the abandoned shelter came into view. Elias guided her inside and quickly secured the perimeter. He gathered water, checked wounds, and prepared a simple meal. She watched him, still silent yet attentive, as if observing his every action for meaning. Elias spoke softly, more to himself than to her. "I don't know what you've faced," he said. "I don't know how many enemies are out there, but I do know this: I'm not leaving you. We'll figure it out together." She hummed in response, low and melodic, and Elias felt a warmth he could not describe. He realized then that trust had formed between them, not just survival, but a bond built on understanding and respect. Hours passed. Elias rested while keeping watch. He noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. She moved with more fluidity now, as though the brief exercise had strengthened her further. He saw her stretch, flexing muscles that were far more defined than any human could possess, and he felt awe stir in his chest. Every motion was deliberate, precise, and elegant. In the quiet moments, Elias allowed himself to ask questions, testing her awareness. "Can you tell me why you're here, why anyone would want you?" The alien's eyes flickered. She did not answer directly, but her gaze swept across the horizon, sharp and calculating. Elias felt a sense of history, of battles fought and challenges faced, radiating from her. She was more than a warrior. She was a leader, a being whose choices affected lives on a scale he could barely imagine. Even so, she had placed herself in his care. She had allowed a human, fragile, inexperienced, and unarmed, to guide and protect her. And in that choice, Elias realized the magnitude of trust she had shown. Night fell again, and the shelter became a small island of safety amidst the vast canyon. Elias built a fire, and she sat quietly, observing the flames. He noticed the faint shimmer around her, subtle, almost imperceptible, as if the very air bent around her presence. He realized that her power was not just physical. It was environmental, intuitive, and controlled. Yet despite it, she had never sought to dominate, to intimidate, or to harm. He spoke softly, sharing more human stories. Of the colony, of survival, of simple joys that seemed insignificant in the galaxy's vastness, but were treasures to those who lived them. She listened, occasionally tilting her head, eyes reflecting curiosity, and a depth of understanding beyond words. Elias felt a profound admiration growing inside him. Here was a being capable of changing the galaxy, yet she was silent, patient, and willing to allow a human to participate in her survival. He realized that true strength did not always manifest in force. It could also manifest in trust, restraint, and subtle influence. As the night deepened, Elias finally allowed himself to rest. He felt her presence beside him, calm and steady, a quiet reassurance that he was not alone. Outside, the canyon winds whispered, carrying distant echoes of a galaxy unaware of the drama unfolding here. And for the first time, Elias understood that their journey was only beginning, that challenges awaited, greater than the canyon walls and hidden paths. Yet he also knew that together, they could face them, and that the bond they had formed would guide them through trials to come. The dawn light filtered softly into the canyon, painting the stone walls in muted shades of gold and gray. Elias stirred awake, muscles sore but spirits steady. After days of travel, careful navigation, and tending the aliens' wounds, he had grown accustomed to the rhythm of their partnership. Even so, a quiet tension lingered in the air, the sense that the world beyond the canyon was watching, waiting, and perhaps approaching. He glanced at her. She sat near the fire, her posture relaxed yet commanding, as though she were simultaneously resting and surveying every inch of their surroundings. Her eyes, the luminescent green that had captivated him from the first moment, flicked toward him, sharp and observant. Elias felt that familiar mixture of awe and comfort. Here was a being of unimaginable strength, yet she had placed herself in his care, relying on him in ways he had never anticipated. "I think we're safe for now," he said softly. "The canyon hides us well and the shelter is solid. You should rest a bit more." She did not respond with words. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, a gesture Elias had come to recognize as acknowledgement. He sat down beside her, careful not to crowd her space, and began tending the remaining minor bruises and scrapes from the previous day's journey. As he worked, he noticed subtle movements, small shifts in her aura, faint vibrations that seemed to resonate with the shelter itself. He could not understand them, but he sensed their significance. They were not threatening. If anything, they were protective, a silent affirmation of her awareness and her power. Elias marveled at the delicate balance. She possessed strength that could reshape worlds, yet she used it with restraint, trusting him to act as her guide and companion. "Do you remember anything?" Elias asked carefully, breaking the silence. "About why you're being hunted or who you are?" Her eyes met his, and for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of sadness, of memory, of something vast and heavy. She hummed softly, a melodic sound that carried more meaning than words could convey. Elias felt a sense of patience and understanding in that hum, as if she were telling him that the time would come for answers, and that they would face them together. The morning passed quietly. Elias prepared a simple meal, sharing it with her as she watched. He told stories of human resilience, of small victories in the colony, of the laughter of children and the warmth of community. She listened, occasionally inclining her head, absorbing his words with an intensity that suggested she valued them more than he could imagine. By midday, Elias knew they could not remain in the canyon indefinitely. He had heard rumors of patrols and bounty hunters seeking alien royalty, and though he had no way of knowing their speed or intent, caution dictated movement. "We need to leave soon," he said. "There's a hidden path that leads further into the mountains. It's dangerous, but it will give us cover." She rose gracefully, moving beside him as he led the way. Her presence seemed to make the terrain more forgiving. Loose stones steadied beneath their feet, sharp ledges seemed to shift just enough to allow safer passage, and the subtle winds carried their scents away from possible trackers. Elias could only stare in amazement, piecing together hints of her power, though he did not yet comprehend its full extent. As they walked, he noticed distant sounds, faint echoes of movement, barely audible over the wind. He froze. "Someone's out there," he whispered. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the valley below. Elias felt a sudden surge of tension, but also reassurance. She did not panic. She did not attack. She merely observed, assessing, calculating. And then she made a subtle gesture with her hand, almost imperceptible. A low hum vibrated through the air, and the distant sounds shifted, as if the very world was responding to her command. Elias' jaw fell open. He realized in that instant that she could influence her surroundings in ways that defied human understanding. A group of figures emerged from the mist below. Elias recognized them immediately, mercenaries, armed and determined, scanning the terrain. He took a deep breath. "We can't outrun them," he said quietly. "We'll have to face this together." The alien queen did not speak, but she stepped forward slightly, her posture radiating calm authority. Elias noticed the subtle shimmer around her intensify, the air bending almost imperceptibly. The mercenaries hesitated, sensing something unfamiliar, something powerful. Elias' heart pounded, yet he felt no fear, not fully. With her by his side, he felt a strange courage, a confidence that together they could endure anything. One of the mercenaries raised a hand, signaling the others. "Step aside. You have nowhere to run," he called. Elias stood protectively, placing himself between them. "We're not moving," he said firmly. "You have no idea who she is or what she's capable of." The alien queen stepped forward then, her movements fluid and controlled. She did not raise a weapon, did not display aggression. And yet the mercenaries froze, the muscles in their bodies tensing instinctively. Elias realized with awe that her presence alone commanded authority. The air seemed heavier, charged with an unspoken warning. She finally spoke, not in words Elias could understand, but in a tone of absolute clarity. The sound resonated in his chest, a vibration that carried meaning beyond language. Elias felt comprehension bloom within him. He understood her intent, her command. They would not be harmed, but neither would they pass without acknowledgement. The mercenaries glanced at each other, confusion evident. Their attempts at intimidation faltered. Elias saw the respect, no, the fear in their posture. He realized fully and finally the being beside him was not just strong, she was the most powerful warrior in the galaxy. He looked at her, eyes wide. You're the queen, aren't you?" he whispered. Her eyes met his, calm and unwavering. She inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. Elias felt a surge of amazement, awe, and a deep, almost overwhelming admiration. The human who had once tended her wounds now stood beside a being whose reputation spanned galaxies, and yet she had trusted him. She had allowed him to care for her, to guide her, and to share her journey. The mercenaries, sensing the futility of their approach, began to retreat, whispering orders and glancing nervously at her. She did not pursue them. Instead, she turned to Elias, a faint, almost imperceptible smile crossing her face. "You have done well," she said softly, her voice now clear to him, though still melodic and otherworldly. "Your courage, your ingenuity, your willingness to care, it is rare among your kind. You have earned my trust." Elias felt his chest swell with pride, but also humility. I did what I could," he said quietly. "I never thought I'd be with someone like you. I didn't know what I was dealing with." She placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "And yet you chose to act even without knowing. That is what makes humans remarkable. Strength is not only measured in power, but in heart, in courage, and in compassion. You have shown all of these and more." Tears stung Elias' eyes. He had spent his life in struggle, in small victories and daily hardships. He had never imagined that these simple qualities, empathy, courage, cleverness, could hold such significance on a galactic scale. And yet here he was, standing beside the most powerful being in existence, and she acknowledged him not as weak or insignificant, but as an equal in the measure of his spirit. She extended her hand, inviting him to rise beside her. Together they gazed out across the canyon, the morning light casting long shadows over the valley. Elias realized that the galaxy, with all its dangers and wonders, was no longer an abstract concept. It was tangible, immediate, and full of possibilities. "You have a choice," she said. "You can return to your colony, your familiar life, or you can stay with me. Together, we can bridge worlds, protect lives, and face the challenges that lie ahead. The galaxy is vast, but humanity has a role to play, a role you have already begun to fulfill." Elias considered her words. He thought of the colony, of the small community struggling to survive, of the children whose laughter he cherished. But he also thought of this moment, of the trust placed in him, and of the extraordinary potential that lay before him. I want to stay," he said finally, voice steady. "I want to help, to learn, to make a difference." She nodded, eyes reflecting approval and warmth. "Then it is decided," she said. "You will remain by my side, not only as a companion, but as a partner. Together, we will face the universe and all that it holds. And in doing so, we will prove that courage, kindness, and ingenuity, qualities your species embodies, are forces more powerful than most can comprehend." The day passed in quiet preparation. Elias assisted her in gathering supplies, reinforcing the shelter, and planning their journey deeper into the mountains. She moved with a grace that was both mesmerizing and humbling, and he continued to marvel at the subtle ways she influenced the environment around them. Small shifts, gentle control, nothing overt, yet profoundly effective. As night fell, Elias kept watch once more. He gazed at her, resting beside the fire, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had begun this journey as a simple human, tending an injured stranger in a storm-lashed valley. He now stood beside a queen, a being whose strength and reputation spanned the galaxy, and he understood something profound. Human qualities, courage, empathy, ingenuity, could inspire even the mightiest beings, bridging worlds and forging bonds stronger than any force of power. The alien queen stirred slightly, sensing his gaze. She smiled faintly, and Elias returned the gesture. Words were unnecessary. Their trust, their bond, and their shared journey spoke volumes. In the distance, the winds whispered through the canyon, carrying echoes of a galaxy unaware of the quiet, transformative moment unfolding here. Elias felt hope, determination, and a sense of purpose swelling within him. Together, they would navigate the unknown, and in doing so, humanity would leave its mark, not through domination, but through heart, courage, and partnership. And so, the human who had tended the alien queen's wounds, unaware of the full extent of her power, stood beside her, ready to face the galaxy, confident that even in the vastness of space, the qualities of humanity could shine brighter than any weapon or force. For in that quiet canyon, amidst the soft glow of bioluminescent flora and the subtle hum of life, Elias understood the truth of their journey. The universe was vast, the challenges immense, but courage, kindness, and ingenuity, the human spirit, could change everything.